This is your host, Danny, and this is Grammar from English Plus Podcast. Today, we're going to start a new mini-series in grammar, and this time, we're going to talk about modals. Modal verbs, we're talking about can, could, will, would, and other verbs that are related to these modal verbs. For the ones who are interested in grammar, you know that we finished Learn the English Tenses mini-series in grammar last week. So this week, we're starting a new mini-series in grammar, and that is modals. Today, we're going to focus on can, could, and be able to. But before I begin, let me tell you that you can practice what you're learning on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. The link is in the description. It will take you to the custom post I created for this episode. And also there is the other link in the description that will take you to my Patreon page where you can become a patron, have access to all the archive, the audio courses, other premium episodes, series, and a lot of other things. Go check it out and see the benefits you get if you become a patron. And by doing that, you will ensure that English Plus never stops. And now, without further ado, let's start talking about can, could, and be able to. Now let's start with can. What do we use can for? C-A-N, can. Now obviously, we use can to talk about ability, right? We use can to say that something is possible or allowed, or that somebody has the ability to do something. So it is not always just about the ability. You can use can to talk about things that are possible or things that are allowed. Now, before I give you a couple of examples to see the meaning of can, let's just focus quickly on something that is very easy to notice, but sometimes people may make mistakes here. And that has to do with the verb that comes with can. Because remember, we're talking about modals. And what is special about modals? Modals can never be used alone because they have no meaning on their own. They modify the meaning of the verb that comes with them, but the meaning all comes from the main verb. So there always has to be a main verb with modals. So here with can, yes, we talked about can. We use it to talk about things that are possible, allowed, or to talk about somebody who has the ability to do something. That's very good. That's the meaning of can. But can cannot be used alone. We need a main verb. And for this main verb, you have to use the verb in the infinitive form. That means we add nothing to the verb. If I want to say can with do, for example, I say do, not does, no doing, not did, nothing. It is do, the zero form, the infinitive form. Can do, can see, can walk, etc. Now let's talk about some examples. We can see the lake from our hotel. As you can see, in pronunciation, we don't usually say can. Because when we say can, people will understand that we're talking about can't. Usually when we say can't, we pronounce this long A, ca. But when we pronounce it like a short one, we can see, that means we're talking about the affirmative form of can. But that is a pronunciation tip. It is very useful because sometimes people might misunderstand what you're saying based on the pronunciation of can and can't because they're very close, right? Usually when can is in the middle of the sentence, like here, we can see. We don't say we can see unless you want to stress it. But that pronunciation tip aside, let's get back to the example. We can see the lake from our hotel. It is possible. It is not about the ability, right? Here, it's not exactly talking about the ability, that we have the ability to see the lake. Yeah, it is true, but here it's more about what's possible, what's not. It is possible we can see the lake from our hotel. So it is not always strictly used to talk about ability. Just keep that in mind, because I don't want you to be constricted to only one use for can. We can use it for a couple of things, so why not? So here, we can see the lake from our hotel. It's possible. Or another example, I don't have a pen. You can use mine. You can use mine. Yes, we can say that it is possible. Yes, we can say that you have the ability to use mine. But here, I'm telling you what you are allowed to do. You can use mine. You are allowed to use mine. So we can use can in this meaning as well. Here, let's talk about one that has to do with the ability. Can you speak any foreign languages? Can you speak any foreign languages? Here, I'm strictly asking about the ability you have to do something. So can you speak any foreign languages? Let me give you another example when we use can to talk about something that is possible. I can come and see you tomorrow if you like. It is not about the ability. Of course I can. I can come, yeah. Do I have the ability to come? Of course. I have the ability to come and see you tomorrow, but I'm just saying here that it is possible for me to come see you tomorrow if you like. Instead of saying all that, you can simply say, I can come and see you tomorrow if you like. That is in a nutshell the meaning or the basic meaning of can. Of course, throughout this series, we're going to learn many different meanings of the same modal verbs or many different uses of the same modal verbs. In affirmative, they are used in certain meanings. In negative, they can be used in different meanings. But let's stick to the basic meanings of can, could, and be able to. Now, before we move to be able to and say what's special about this be able to and why do we need it in the first place, why don't we just stick to can and could and forget about be able to? Before we do that, let me just remind you that there is a negative form of can, and that is can't, which is cannot. And by the way, if you want to write cannot without contracting it, if you want to say can't, it's C-A-N''T. Everybody knows about this. But if you want to say cannot, don't make the mistake of writing two words, can and not, because when you say cannot, it is written as one word, cannot. But unless it's formal writing or something like that, we usually write it in contracted form. So the negative of can is can't or cannot. I'm afraid I can't come to the party on Friday. It's not possible. And of course, with the same meanings I talked about for can, you can use them all in negative and say can't. And now let's talk about be able to. Now, why is it necessary to have another thing that is not exactly modal, right? It's be able to, so it's verb to be. That means we can say I am, you are, etc. And modal verbs, we can't change them. We don't change them. Can is can. There's no can and canning and cans and canned, etc., except for other meanings, of course. But we don't have any conjugation for these verbs. But for be able to, yes, of course we can. We can say be, we can say was, we can say were, we can say am, etc. But why do we need it? Is it necessary? Can't we just use can or could? Yes, of course. You can say that somebody is able to do something, but can is more usual. So, what the hell? What are you talking about? Why are you teaching us something like this when can is even more usual than be able to? Absolutely. Be able to is not necessary. Be able to is not more common than can. It's not even a good idea to use three words when you can use only one, right? But we can use it. I'm just telling you about it, and I'm going to tell you about places where you have to because it's the only way possible, it's the only grammatical way possible to talk about ability. But let's stick to what I said. Be able to is just like can, but can is more usual. For example, we say, we are able to see the lake from our hotel. Now, I used this example earlier, and I said, we can see the lake from our hotel. Which one do you think is better? Of course, the one that is using can. It's a lot better. We can see the lake from our hotel, or we are able to see the lake. Why? Why do we add more words when we can use only one? That is a rule that applies to almost every single situation you have in English, especially in writing. Whenever you can express the same meaning in fewer words, do it. But here, I'm just saying that because sometimes can is not possible. Can only comes in two forms. Can in the present, could in the past. Now, you might say that, yeah, we use could in the present. Absolutely. And we will talk about all the other uses of could in later episodes from the series. But for now, let's just talk about those basic meanings of can, and that is what is possible or allowed, or to talk about that somebody has the ability to do something, etc. So in this meaning, can only has two forms. Can, the present, could, the past. So what if I want to use present perfect? Or what if I want to use the same meaning of can with another modal verb? How can I say that? Now, of course, if I say, for example, I can't sleep, you don't have to say, I am not able to sleep. Well, that's weird. That's strange and awkward. I can't sleep is a lot better. Or if you want to say, Tom can come tomorrow, a lot better than Tom is able to come tomorrow. Although it's possible, of course, it is completely okay to say Tom is able to come tomorrow, but it is more natural to say Tom can come tomorrow. Or Maria can speak French, Spanish, and English. That's a lot more natural and usual than saying Maria is able to speak French, Spanish, and English. It's weird. Nobody speaks like that. Nobody uses be able to unless it's really necessary, and it's the only option you've got. And you might say, well, why do we need it? Well, what if I go back to the first example, I can't sleep, but I don't want to say I can't sleep. It's not about the present. I want to use present perfect. I want to use the present perfect to talk about I can't sleep recently. So I can't sleep recently doesn't really work. You know we talked about the present perfect in our earlier series, Learn the English Tenses. But here, we want to talk about something that's been happening recently, so we can use the present perfect here. But if I want to say I haven't, what do I say here? Can I say I haven't can or I haven't could? Well, actually neither. Here, when I say I haven't, I need the past participle of the main verb. And can and could don't have any past participle or any other conjugation for that matter. That's why they're modal verbs. So here, your only option is be able to. And obviously, as we said, be can be conjugated. So we say I haven't been able to sleep recently. And here, we can see why be able is important. Because in this case, you have to. There is no other way. Unless you can change the present perfect and use present, so you just say, I can't sleep. But if you want to say, I haven't, you need be able to, because that's the only way you can conjugate the verb. I haven't been able to sleep recently. Now, let's move to the second example I gave you. Tom can come tomorrow. But what if I want to say might? And you might say here, well, you can simply say Tom might come tomorrow, right? Yeah, that's right. I can say Tom might come tomorrow. But what if I want to use might plus the possibility or the ability? I want to use both meanings in the same sentence. Can I do that with can? Of course, you can't say Tom might can come tomorrow. That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And I'm sure that you've never heard of that before. And you can see it is wrong. So if you want to use might and you still want to use can, you can do that with be able to. You can say, Tom might be able to come tomorrow. So here we can see that be able is handy because it can be conjugated. We need the zero form after might. Very good. We can use be able to because be able to be in the zero form or the infinitive is be. So Tom might be able to come tomorrow. What about the last example? Maria can speak French, Spanish, and English. But what if you're reading something in a want ad and you can see that applicants for the job must? Here it's the same case like might. We're using another modal verb. And by the way, don't worry about might and must. We will talk about them in later episodes. I'm just giving you examples to tell you why it is important to learn about be able to. Here, applicants for the job must, what? Must can speak 2 foreign languages? Must could doesn't work. Right? But be able to works. We can say applicants for the job must be able to speak 2 foreign languages. That works. So you see, be able to is just like can, but don't use it unless it is necessary, because that's the only place where we use it actually. Of course you can use it if you want, but we don't normally use it when we can simply use can or can't, or even could. All right? So that is be able to. I hope you can appreciate the importance of that. And this is something you need to know about grammar. If you don't know why you're learning something, don't learn it, because usually you're not going to use it, or just dig in further and try to understand why you're learning something. If you don't understand why you're learning something, or you can't find any application of this grammar rule that you're learning, don't learn it, because definitely it's either useless, the teacher is useless, or you haven't been able to understand it properly yet. Okay? So that was about be able to. And now we will talk about could. How we can use could, where we should use could, and where in some situations be able to in the past is a better option. So let's talk about the final point of our episode today, and that is could.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Looking to enhance your English skills while exploring a world of knowledge? Then English Plus Podcast website is just for you. Dive into diverse topics ranging from science to literature, history to business, and myths to modern insights. Each episode from our podcast or article from our magazine is a journey of learning and discovery, designed to not only improve your language skills, but also broaden your understanding of the world. Join us at English Plus Podcast, where language meets limitless learning. Tune in today and take your English to the next level. Visit EnglishPlusPodcast.com to start your journey. English Plus Podcast, language, learning, enlightenment. Never stop learning with English Plus. So, let's start talking about could as the past of can, right? As I told you earlier, and I'm going to say that again, could can be used for present meaning. And we will talk about that later on in our series about modal verbs. But for today, we're just talking about can, could, and be able to for this specific meaning, ability, possibility, or what you're allowed to do, something like that. So here, could is the past of can. Sometimes, right? We use could especially with verbs like see, hear, smell, taste, feel, remember, understand. I'll give you a couple of examples. We had a lovely room in the hotel. The whole story is in the past. We can see the lake doesn't make sense, right? Because you are telling the story in the past and it's all the past. And you use can here, well, it's not exactly right. We need to use the past form of can, and we have a past form of can, which is could, right? So here, we had a lovely room in the hotel, we could see the lake. And here, we're just using could as the past of can. Another example, as soon as I walked into the room, I could smell gas. There was a problem. I could smell gas. Or, I was sitting at the back of the theater and couldn't hear very well. So that is, in general, how we use could. We use could simply as the past of can. When we are talking about something in the past and we want to use the same meaning of can, well, use could. That's possible. We also use could to say that somebody had the ability to do something or was allowed to do something, exactly like can, right? Like when we say, my grandfather could speak 5 languages. Well, my grandfather is dead, and now I'm talking about somebody who's dead and he could speak 5 languages. And here, you need to be careful. If you're talking about somebody who's alive, for example, let's say my friend. My friend could speak 5 languages. What does that mean? Could speak 5 languages? Can't he speak 5 languages now? Because this kind of skill is difficult to forget unless the person has a mental problem or some accident or something, or the person dies. So here, if you want to use it in this manner, make sure that you're talking about something, some ability from the past. Or the person himself or herself is dead. Like when we talk about famous scientists or famous writers or composers, things like that, yeah, you can use could because these people are dead. We're talking about dead people here. Yeah, we can use could. My grandfather is dead. My grandfather could speak 5 languages. Of course, he can't speak 5 languages now because he's dead, right? Another example, we were totally free. We could do what we wanted. That means we were allowed to do what we wanted. So here, again, we can use could as the past of can in all the meanings I talked about at the beginning of this episode when I talked about can. But here we come to a point where I'm going to tell you about places where you don't normally use could, but you use was able to or were able to, obviously, instead. Now, when we use could for general ability, that's possible, like with see or hear or speak 5 languages, like I talked about my grandfather. My grandfather could speak 5 languages. I'm talking about general ability, and that's fine. Or I could see them, but not very clearly. Also, I'm talking about general ability. That's okay. But to say that somebody succeeded in doing something in a specific situation, we normally use was or were able to, or we use managed to, not could. I'll give you an example. The fire spread quickly, but everybody was able to escape or managed to escape. Here, we don't normally say could escape. The fire spread quickly, it's a specific situation, and I'm talking about something a person or a group of people succeeded in doing. Yes, it has to do with the meaning of could in the past, but because it's a specific situation, we don't normally use could. We normally use was or were able to or managed to. So here, the fire spread quickly, but everybody was able to escape, or everybody managed to escape, not could escape. Another example, I didn't know where Max was, but I managed to find him in the end. That is also a specific situation. It is not a general ability. You might say, but you're talking about ability here, or you're talking... No, not exactly. I'm not talking about a general ability. In the first example, those people that managed to escape the fire, they didn't have the general ability of escaping fires, right? Nobody has this kind of ability. They managed to escape. They were able to escape. But they didn't have the ability. They could escape fire. Every time there was a fire, they could escape like it was a hobby of theirs. No, it doesn't work this way. It's a specific situation. And in the second example, it's the same thing. I don't have a general ability to find Max, but I managed to find him. That's something specific. Now, let's compare two examples. In one of them, I will use could because it's possible. I'm just talking about the ability. And in the other one, it's kind of the same example, but I will change something very small in the example, which makes it better to use managed to or was able to. Let me start with the first one where it is general ability. Jack was an excellent tennis player when he was younger. He could beat anybody. I'm talking about the general ability as a tennis player. He was an excellent tennis player when he was younger. In general, he could beat anybody. In general, he was good enough to beat anybody. He had the ability. So could is perfectly fine here. Another example about Jack, about a tennis match, but here it's specific. Jack and Andy played a match yesterday. Andy played well, but Jack managed to beat him. So here, it is not about the general ability of Jack. It is about that situation that happened yesterday. It's a specific situation. So here, we don't normally use could, right? Remember that. We can use be able to or manage to. So here, Andy played well, but Jack managed to beat him. He succeeded in beating him this time. So in these examples, we don't normally use could, we use be able to or manage to. Of course, be able to, you can choose between was or were accordingly. But what about the negative of could, which is couldn't or could not? By the way, could not is not like cannot. Cannot is one word, could not two words. Remember that. Couldn't, obviously, it's the same. COULDN''T. That's the short form. But here, we said that in affirmative, could talks about general ability, and when we want to be specific, to talk about a specific situation, somebody succeeded in doing something, we don't normally use could, we use be able to or manage to. That is true about affirmative, but it doesn't matter in negative. So in negative, just use couldn't. It doesn't matter if it is a specific situation or if it is general ability. We can say my grandfather couldn't swim, could not swim, or I looked for Max everywhere but I couldn't find him. You don't have to say I wasn't able to find him or I didn't manage to find him. Well, you can still say them if you want. You can say I wasn't able to find him, but it's not necessary because couldn't can be used. Could in negative can be used for both. It is possible in all situations. For our last example, the one we talked about, the tennis match, Andy played well, but he couldn't beat Jack. Well, we can say he wasn't able to beat Jack or he didn't manage to beat Jack. That's fine. It's okay, but it's not necessary. And remember, when it's not necessary, don't do it because we have 2 more words or 3 more words. No, couldn't is fine, but he couldn't beat Jack. So that is everything that I wanted to tell you about in this episode. Remember that we talked about can, could, and be able to. We talked about the main meanings of can. We talked about be able to and why it is necessary. And then we talked about could and the situations where we don't normally use could, we use be able to or manage to instead. And finally, we talked about could in negative, where we can use it in all situations. Remember, the best thing you can do to remember all these things we talked about today is to practice, and I got you covered. I have added exercises on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, not just EnglishPlusPodcast.com. Go there and search for the... No. Just there is a link in the description of the episode. The link will take you to the custom post I created for this episode. You will find everything you need to practice the things you learned in this episode. Now, that being said, don't forget, support me on Patreon to help me keep going, to help English Plus keep going. And there are a lot of benefits coming your way if you become a patron. With that being said, thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.